Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome back for another session.
He's
Um,
lying. He's lying. He's lying. Gil, don't believe a word he says. He wants you to become a good Christian like his grandmother because he didn't succeed. Yeah, we know. We know.
sorry, did I unmute you, Uri? Okay, so let's without any further ado, let's.
Can I just heard a nice talk today by Rabbi Golub, who's the living energy behind the Jewish JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service, about the covenants and the three covenants and their symbols between God and mankind, Abraham and the Jews, and the symbol between Noah and God was the rainbow, the symbol of the covenant. The symbol between God and Abraham was the bris, the circumcision, and the symbol of the covenant between God and the Jewish people was the Shabbat,
Very nice.
which was very nice, actually. Because I guess Shabbat must be described in that way in the Torah, right? I guess.
Beini or Bnei Yisrael, Brit
Oti Lo'olam. Yeah, Oti Lo'olam.
It's an eternal covenant.
Right.
Yeah, nice. That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, and accepting the covenant means accepting Shabbat, I guess.
That's part of it. The Ten Commandments is called the Brit.
Yep.
Luchot HaBrit. It's on the tablets of the covenant. It's all of that. It's So yeah, and I think the more I think about it, this Shema Yisrael is our daily and nightly our declaration of our commitment to the covenant. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad that's really what we're saying. There's only one God who we are devoted to, and He's the King. We love Him. We should love Him, says Moshe. Love Him with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. And these words should be upon your heart. That we did last week, and then this week is not only in your heart, but v'shinantam lebenecha. You will teach them to. Now, what does it say? It really has to be taken in context, right? Take v'hayu advarim ha'ele, and these words, these matters, these they should be on your heart. V'shinantam lebenecha. You should impress them upon your children. V'dibarta, and you should speak about them. V'shivtecha beveisecha, when you stay at home, when you are sitting at home. Of lechtecha v'derech, when you are walking on the way. Of shochpecha uvkumecha, and when you lie down and when you get up. So that's tonight's pasuk that we are going to be exploring. So it's interesting. Just the first thing to point out is, what is, if you're reading this chapter of the Torah and you come to these words, and v'hayu hadvarim, and these instructions is a translation, it means these words, right? These matters. Which matters are we talking about?
I mean, the part just above it is the loving your Lord your God with all your heart and all your might and all your soul, right? Those matters, those instructions.
I would, right? If I'm reading correctly, simply, of course, right? And then you could stretch it back to Shema Yisrael. Why not?
Sure.
Right? So because if I'm not mistaken, let me just see something. Just in terms of the way the Torah is written, is it has gaps. It has sometimes at the end of a line, it might have a gap in the middle of a line, it might have a gap all the way to the end of a line. The Sukkot or Sumot. This, yes, you see over here a pay, right? That means patuach. It's open. There's open space over here. You see over here a samach. That samach means stuma, means that there's a gap, but it's not a new line. This in the Torah scroll would start over there. So this is a new chapter, right? This is a new chapter, a new paragraph at least. And if we're reading it, I think it's self-contained, right? Here's the chapter, the paragraph, and it says, and it will be these words. Now, we know from the Talmud that these words are to be on your heart. The Talmud says, right? Was it a midrash? Maybe it was a midrash. How are you going to love God? What do you mean, love God? How do I do that? Oh, study Torah, right? Come to learn with Rabbi Bergman on a Wednesday night. You're going to be loving God like never before, right? So Hadavarim Ha'eleh is the Torah. That means, what do you mean these matters? The whole Torah. Yes, the whole Torah. That's what's included here. What I think is wait, I meant to change it. What I think is important is to not take it too far out of its simple meaning. Meaning, these matters are Shema Yisrael and loving God, right? Acknowledging God, acknowledging His oneness, acknowledging the covenant that we're in with Him, and loving Him is really the purpose of everything. That's what we're doing, right? Here we are, Jews. We've made this declaration, and says Moses, well, these matters, acknowledging God, His oneness, the covenant, and loving Him, that's what it's all about. So, specifically, these matters is that. How do you do that? Well, everything else are just details filling into that, which gives context to our Torah study, right? Our Torah study is not some bland, studying for some exam or something. No, it's a method. It's a means to loving God and to recognizing God better and in a more deep way. So, right? Is that understood? Meaning these words can be interpreted in two different ways. It could be specific these words, which is very interesting, these words, yeah. Or it could mean the whole Torah. What I want to say is the relationship between the two is it's the whole Torah over here, yes, but it's all focused on this little these little verses of these two verses here of the acknowledgement and the love. Okay. So that's the first point about, okay, Vishinantin Levanecha. And now we go ahead and over here, right? Impress them, it's them, I guess it's these words, right? Upon your children. Now we'll see the Rashi. The word Vishinantam is a very interesting word, an irregular word right there. Vidibartabam, so tell your children and recite them, speak about them. V'shivtecha b'veisecha, when you stay at your home, when you're sitting at your home. Uvlechtecha b'derech, when you are going on the way. Uvshochbecha uvkemecha, and when you lie down and when you get up. Okay, so what do all these things mean? In terms of just a simple reading, any thoughts? Anyone have any thoughts?
Is this the basis for Shacharei, Mincha, and Maariv?
Oh, does this have to do with prayer? Yes, yes and no, meaning the Shema said of b'shochbecha, when you lie down at nighttime, uvkumecha, and when you get up in the morning, the Shema plays a focal point, let's say an important point of the morning and evening service, right? It's really the recitation of the Shema and then prayer, as we know it, right? A mincha does not have the Shema in it. Mincha is just the prayer service. So it fits into, I think we gotta get our chicken and the egg straight. The Shema really came before prayer, right? The Shema, this recitation, it says clearly in the Torah when you lie down and when you get up. The Talmud has this question: where did prayer come from? Is prayer from the Torah? And the times for prayer, where do they come from? So that seems to be it does say that Abraham prayed Shachris, Yitzchak prayed Mincha, Yaakov prayed Mariv. We got them from our forefathers. And then the Talmud says, and who davened Musaf, right? Right? And then it says there must be, it correlates to the sacrifices, that there was a morning sacrifice and a Musaf sacrifice on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and then there was an afternoon sacrifice, and then it kind of find something to do with Mariv at night, that the sacrifices kept on burning. So yeah, Jason, very good, right? It's got that correlation, and that's how it fits in. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
It's also sort of all the time, right? When you're at home, when you're away, when you lie down, when you get up, it's, pretty much it doesn't include when you go to the bathroom, but it seems like that could fit into that.
Right. So it's very interesting that you say that, because the halacha is, the Jewish law about learning Torah is you should
not to do it in the bathroom. I know. I'm sorry. I know you're not supposed
to do it in the bathroom.
That's why I study math. That was actually my original reason for going
Oh,
into
my
it.
word.
It's otherwise I am completely obsessed, and so really it's the origin of my entire career. No, I was joking, but just that it seems like just about everything.
Well, here's something you might know, but if you don't, you'll find it very very interesting. Okay, so after Moses came, who was the Jewish leader after Moses?
Aaron.
No. Well, Aaron really was the high priest, and he actually died before Moses.
Oh,
he took over his leadership as the
Joshua.
-1.
At least. At
least. That's it, Jesus.
Kinderlach. We've got to go on the bimah, and we're going to go and present to the shul. We need to know these things. Okay. Joshua, came along Joshua, and Joshua is, he gets a, okay, he gets prophecy. The Lord is speaking to Joshua, right? And after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' attendant, and he starts to speak to him. And he says all these things about, you need to take this seriously, Joshua, this is the covenant, be strong and resolute. These people can be difficult. And then he says like this, but you must be very strong and resolute to observe faithfully all the teaching that my servant Moses enjoined upon you. Do not deviate from it right or left, that you may be successful wherever you go. And then he says, let not this book of teaching Lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh, right? There's not this book of teaching. Mi picha, it should not leave your lips. Vehagita bo yamam v'layla, and recite it day and night. Yeah, and the Talmud says that's it, folks. Right? What should we be doing? We should be delving into the Torah and speaking about it and reciting it. Yomam v'layla, day and night. Okay, so there's a preoccupation here for the Jewish people. If this is the book of the covenant, and the covenant is the meaning of our life, well, let's be involved with it. So, I think we've spoken about the Vilna Gaon, right? That great sage from Vilna. So the Vilna Gaon, let's just find out. Vilna Gaon. So he was a pretty he was pretty interesting. In terms of this is very unreliable. All right, let's just see here. Well, there we go. Okay. So there he is. Apparently, what he did not look like, but that's as good as we get it. Elijah of Vilna, 1720 to 1797. And anyone that thinks to himself a Litvak this is our spiritual father. So here it is. When he reached a more mature age, Elijah decided to go into exile, and he wandered into various parts of Europe, including Poland and Germany, as was the custom of the pious at the time. It's said, later in life, he was very instrumental in correcting the correct text of the Talmud. What we have today is very much his Talmud. There's tons of different copies and different versions. And they say he was able to correct them because when he went into the self-imposed exile, what would he do? He'd go from shul to shul and see what's on the shelf. And he noticed all the different texts, and he remembered them. And then when he got back to Vilna, he put his finger up. By the time he was 20 years old, rabbis were submitting their most difficult halakhic problems to him. Scholars, Jews and non-Jews, sought his insights into mathematics and astronomy. Okay, he returned to his native city in 1748, having then acquired considerable renown.
He's the one who studied math on the toilet so that he wouldn't think about God. Was that
This is him.
That's him.
This is him. So
I remember that story.
You just got it wrong. You study math. Generally, men understand. Okay. No. Yes. So what was his? Okay, we'll have to spend another time. Let's see if I can find it quickly. His mathematics. This one. His name was Kramer. Here we go. The Vilna Gaon was not only a rabbi, but as someone well-versed in the realm of mathematics, he was credited to have written a book on trigonometry called Ayel Meshulash. There's a myth that the Vilna Gaon composed the Ayel Meshulash in the bathroom. However, this is problematic on two accounts. Let's see why.
Citation needed.
One, of the states of outhouses back then were incredibly inhospitable, stank, unlit, very tiny, and out in the cold, and was designated to make one to spend as little time there. For a second, the Ayal Meshilach was written in Hebrew, and the Jewish rule forbids one to talk or even write Hebrew in disgusting places. Wow. Okay, yes, those are pretty good. Okay. And one's not even meant to think in Torah there. So now, as for the legend, you might know this, of the Vilna Gaon coming up with Kramer's rule or Kramer's theorem. Did you know that, Don?
No,
Do you know what Kramer's rule is?
I'm reading it now. That the sum of two random variables is another random variable.
This is untrue as
No,
well.
it's not true.
Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
So his grandfather's last name was Kramer. Yeah. Really, Harold Kramer gets it. But you know, at least Yeshiva Bocharim know what Kramer's theorem is, even if they falsely. Okay. So the joke goes that they asked the Vilna Gaon, when did you know so much Torah, you're so engrossed in Torah, you're so careful with Torah. When did you come up with all your mathematics? So he using a play on this word on this verse over here. That one should be engaged in Torah day and night. So his answer was right, to recite it day and night. His answer was, I did it when it was neither day and neither night. Right, that was his funny way of saying he did it in the outhouse. Yes, which is very improbable. Okay, good. So now that we've cleared that up, yes. Something occurs to anyone else? Anyone else? Yes. And by the way, Dan, we will see a bit later. And I like it because the Talmud just right. This is from a midrash. I think it's also in the Talmud. Rashi, and thou shalt speak of them, i.e., that your principal topic of conversation should be about them. Right? Speak about them. This is what your speech should be about. Make them the principal and do not make them the secondary important. Right? So only a little bit of schmoozing, but down to Torah study most of the time. Right? It should be, as they say back in the Haim, all right, Yiddish Sprach, your Jewish speech is Torah. That's what you're involved in. Good. Something that I noticed is order. I would have imagined that the verse to first say you should speak about them, and you could say wherever you are and in all these situations, Vishinantam, and teach them to your children. The order of first teach them to your children and then you should speak about them seems a little odd, right? You would have imagined, no, first you and your engagement, relationship with it, and then passing it on to your children. I have a few guesses at the moment, but maybe let's wait till the end. We'll come back to that, see if there's, I don't know if anyone has an insight into that or wants to. Well then, let's move on. Okay. So let's see the Rashis over here. What is this phrase? Vishinantam, right? Says Rashi, Lashon chidudhu. This word expresses the idea of being sharp, sharply impressed. Does Rashi bring it here? Okay, the Guaria will help us. And what's the idea? Shiyu muchudodim befika. The words of Torah should be sharp in your mouth. She'im yishalcha adam dava. Someone would ask you a matter of Torah. Lo tiyeh tzarich legamgein. You don't have to stutter around, stammer around. Ela oimer lo miyad. You can say it immediately. Right? So it's a beautiful, and the Guaria, now remember, right? So Rashi was 10th century, 9th century, even. Wait, the century is always one above. Rashi was 11th century. The Guaria is, I think, 17th century. From the Maharal of Prague. So he wrote a commentary on Rashi, and he supports Rashi, and he says, this. How do we know that it means something sharp? Because in Yeshaya, in the verse in Isaiah, I can't get there from there. Let's try. Let's do this. That will take me to the source, and then here it will go there. And what does it say? Asher chitzav shinunim, and their arrows are sharpened. Not even sure about the context over there, but it doesn't matter. There's a Guaria, that's what the word means, right? Sharp arrows. So that's a proof to Rashi's commentary over here that Torah should be sharp. And that's what it means. You should sharpen them for your children. Okay, so what's special about that? Why do you think why do you think the Torah is using this? It's really an odd word. I'm not sure it's used again in terms of learning Torah, teaching Torah. So why would that be the correct, or what's that teaching us? This usage or phrase.
You need to pierce them with words of Torah.
Oh, okay.
It's within them,
So,
lodged deep within. So.
Like a sharp. You're imagining like a sharp spear. Or, let the words be sharp and enter into them. And great. I like that. Okay. Yeah. Make sure that it penetrates.
I'm just a trauma surgeon, so I deal with sharp things going into people all the time. So where my mind goes.
Not usually words.
The reason
Words hurt too.
You too.
The reason why we are all able to study Torah and have different perspectives is because we have different life experiences. That's very true. Now I have a very good friend here in Baltimore, Gianni Tozo. He is a glass blower, Italian glass blower. He's a convert. He's actually a maestro of glass blowing. Uri, are you familiar with him? Oh, we have to have a visit one day. He's fantastic. He grew up in Venice. Tozo Brothers is, if you go to Venice and you go down the canal, you see their factory, their glass factory, and that's where he grew up. Somehow landed up working in the ghetto. Ghetto is an Italian word, in the Jewish ghetto of Venice. Some pretty Jewish girl walks in one day and he's off, and he's an amazing man. Actually, I think he might. No, he did convert afterwards, but I think he was well on his way before he met the nice Jewish girl. So I asked him once, how do you educate your children? How do you get the message across? So he said he has a tradition from his mother. You say it 1,000 times, and you hope at one time it sinks in, right? You keep on prodding. Fine. Besides that, Jason, what would you think would be the correct way to teach one's children in a way that the Torah does penetrate them?
I mean, I think you start with the simplest of ideas, and not having children myself, I don't really know how to educate them. I suppose I have residents, so I have to try with those, but Sheckman can let you know if I've succeeded or not. But I suspect each child may be different. Some may respond to the stories, some may respond to the laws, the structure, some may respond to the poetry of some of it. I don't know, but you have to your own figure that out.
What's interesting to me, though, is that this commentary, I don't know about other commentaries, don't conceive of modeling behaving according to the Torah as part of teaching them, which is a strange omission.
Oh, maybe you just answered my question. Look at that, Uri. Right? Look how you read the verse. I've never thought of that. Teach them to your children. How do you teach them to children? Because you yourself will speak about them when you are,
but speaking about them. Yeah, but speaking about them is not the same as modeling behavior about them.
Yes, it's one specific model. Yes, I agree with you. It's interesting that it's, although I would say to you, in the context that we are speaking about, meaning the Shema, the specific focus here is Torah study, right? And these words that I command you shall be on your heart. You shall teach them to you. Meaning, here it is. Where's, Torah study? Where do you find that in the Torah? Right over here in the Shema. It's an interesting question to then ask more generally, do we find the Torah commanding us or guiding us to model for our children?
Well, there are lots of other psukim in the Torah that deal with that, right? What does God ask of you but to do justice, avoid evil, and walk humbly with your God? I mean, that's ethical behaviors, which are the summary of the Torah's expectations or God's expectations. So there are examples of that kind of instruction, if you will, but it's absent here, and
Uri, there's no period in the Hebrew though, right? Like, impress them upon your children and recite them when you stay home, and right, there's no break there. So maybe it's not supposed to be understood as that the reciting and the speaking of them is what you're supposed to do, but the impressing and the speaking, right? It's vishinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shuvtecha v'veitecha. It's not a separate, right? The clause doesn't end.
Fair enough.
I'm misreading. I don't.
No,
Rabbi.
I think so.
You're reading it different. You're not saying, you're saying you should be teaching them to children, and then you speak about them. Both
you put a break there, right?
Is then, we don't. Interesting, because we don't find. I'm not familiar with any commentary that says, there's a specific morning and night teaching time. Teach your children morning and night, just like you recite the Shema. But I hear that as an alternate way to look at this. And then it would be if it's constant, it leads a bit more to what Uri's saying, right?
Well, the modeling of the behavior is in the Vishinantam Livanecha, not necessarily just in the Vidibarta Bam. That's a mode of
Yeah.
impressing it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Meaning, it doesn't say teach them to your children. It says, sharpen them for your children. And you're saying in instruction and in behavior. Should be clear. Okay, I like that. Yeah, although Uri, just going back to your point, I'm not sure. Trying to think now, as a method of education, meaning, yes, of course, the Torah says and the prophets say all these beautiful things about ethical behavior and who you should be and what you should do. But do we find that as specific in the discussion of education, like it is over here, right? Teach these words, teach these to your children. Behave ethically so your children will learn. Although I think there is. Okay, we have to look. There's definitely the Seder night, right, where it's all built upon these these questions that the children are. You're doing something, and the children ask. What are you doing? What is this? What is that? So, which is interesting, right? You could build a little bit more on that because that's not just modeling for the sake of your children to copy you, but modeling for your children to inquire and understand and get involved in a conversation with you. Okay. Next. David, you're very quiet tonight. Did you eat like 3 steaks and 4 bags of chips?
Talking to some folks at the hospital about some patients, so sorry if I'm a little distracted.
Oh, you're actually saving someone's life? Fine.
I don't know about saving, but trying to prevent bad things from happening.
Okay, good. Fine.
Keep it up.
Yeah. Fine. Now, it's an interesting thing. I'll just show you the beginning of it. Because it's interesting historically as well. So this Gu Arya, the Maharal of Prague, he's commenting on Rashi once again, and he says the following. He says, unfortunately, the translation didn't come out here. No, it hasn't been translated. It's a very long and complicated book. There's a Gu Arya. The Torah should be sharp in your mouth, right? You should, if someone asks you a question, you shouldn't have to stammer. You could be very clear and okay. Vahatam, he says, the reason the Torah should become what's called your Torah, his Torah. It says in the Psalms, that's another verse, right? Not from Joshua, but from Psalms that says, and in his Torah, meaning the person that learns it, V'gam nikra kinyan, nikret kinyano. It's an acquired thing. You acquire the Torah; it becomes yours. It's lekach tov nasati lechem. It's a lekach. It's an acquisition. So the Torah, modern jargon, right? It's make it your own, right? The Torah is if you make it your own, you own it. Ve'im megam b'geim behem ein ze torato. If you stammer, so then obviously it's not yours, right? If someone asks you your name, don't forget your name, it's you own it. So, okay. V'lo nikra kinyana, it's not his acquired acquisition either. Because the acquisition, ela im shalohu, it's only an acquisition if it belongs to you. And if you are stem the Torah, you're doubtful about it, enu shelo legamri. That means it's not yours completely. Now he goes on a tirade. Obedorot ha'elu, in these generations, oba'atzot elu, in these places, holchim nativot akal kalut. They're going in very strange ways, our fellow Jews. Choshvim lelechet lifnim lagia lamakom cheftzam. They think to go to where they want to get. V'neihem shavim achor. They're traveling backwards. Avke ketzat min advarim. Let me tell you what I mean. Af ein ze makomam. This is not really the place, but I got to rant somewhere. Ki ketzara ruchi mahachil berot le'einaim kilkul darchei Torah. I'm very frustrated, right, to hold back when I see the destruction of the way of the Torah. She'im yishalu Torah, right? If you ask people about Torah, ain't tshuva b'piv. No one can give you a straight answer to anything anymore. Right? Law died. Oh yeah, that often happens. Better to use this thing. But then I pulled it up for a reason. And then he says, Lo die, la nuki nimshalu kebehemoth nidmu. Right? A verse that says, someone that's a simpleton that didn't learn, he's like an animal. Right? Well, what's the great, right? V'lo kemu'ula sheba behemoth rak kebnei chamurim. We compared not even to really elevated animals, we're like donkeys. Lo kechamurim rak nahapech libenu le'evan domain. Alavai would be donkeys. We like a stone that is inanimate, dead. Ach tavaze nosaf ki arishonim asher hayer be'erech aleinu ke'erech galgal elyon legalgal chadal. If we look back and we look at our previous rabbis, the Rishonim, the ones that came before us, so they they were like the sun and we're like a mustard seed. Haim holchim, what does he say? Haim holchu netivat yosha hadrich et talmidaim v'netivat emet. They went in the straight way, ad shigiu al ma'asharoi, until they got to where they should. But ha'pachot hazen, our lowly generation, in yita bata in yita azla. Poverty follows poverty. Yeah, that's what the Talmud says. Saru min haderech hayasher. They've gone from the straight way. Miyad shiyavu hana lashkir b'Torah ad sheyaskin. From the time a person comes to lashkir, to learn Torah, to be serious about it, diligent, until he gets old. Hem nogim kemo Adam asakal asher yira uman echad boina choyma choyfa yisod amak lechoyma ad sheyir kaim lechoyma. Okay, he goes on. So his problems like this. He gives a nice long an introduction, and he says like this. Right? He says we don't go in order. We don't go in order. And I think things got worse from his time, actually. V'hagorem b'zeh, what's the problem? Chomer koidem shenivne rishon mitroseis. If you don't build the wall brick by brick, it's gonna fall down. And kasher haya b'doret rishonim natnu gvulam ve'itim lechanek na'al pidachav. Before they had times and when it was fitting to teach a child according to their way. Ben chamesh lemikra. A 5-year-old can learn the verses of the Torah. Ben Eser, when you're 10, la Mishnah, you can start the Mishnah. Ben Tesvav, when you're 15, the Talmud, you start learning Talmud. Hakol kedei letet lana masa kasher yuchal seit lefi tivo. The whole reason is that you give children, you give them what they are able to cope with where they are. You don't overload them. And he goes on to say, and here we have that, everyone's rushing into the most complicated, and it's fascinating, and I haven't been exposed to it that much over here, but I remember in Israel, we lived in a pretty religious community up there in Telstone, and, I was at a bar mitzvah maybe 2-3 years ago. I went for a friend, I was in Israel, it was a friend's bar mitzvah with his child. And this child gave a bar mitzvah speech which would blow you away. He was quoting this rabbi and that rabbi and this question and that question and this answer and that answer. And, by the end, it's like, wow, But you could see that, it just was like a parrot. He didn't have, you could see it wasn't something he really grasped. It was way too complicated because the 13-year-olds, they can't. It's very rare that a 13-year-old can grasp very deep and complicated abstract concepts. They need to go.
It's common for them to think that they can.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Right. So his tirade, by the way, this is the longest pieces he has in his entire book. Okay. Back to Rashi. Okay. This is a fascinating Rashi. Comes along Rashi, and he says, teach them to your children. Teach them to your children. Elu hatalmidim. Who are these children? These are your students, your disciples. Metzinu b'chol makom shatalmidim kruim banim. Because we find that disciples, students are termed, banim are called children. Shneema, like it says, banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. Moses says to the people, you are children, banim, of the Lord your God. Now, what does that mean? Did God give birth to us? Right? We're the children of God. Oh, my parents gave birth to me. Right? Why? What does it mean we are God's children?
You keep coming back to Jesus, Rabbi. I don't understand.
Yep.
So
Sorry.
That's I'm sure they build on this, right? But that's, yes. So says Rashi, it's very interesting, right? In what sense are we God's children? So we often think of that as God as a nurturing parent. Says Rashi, no, that's maybe that's also true, but really we are God's students, right? God has, let's look up the context there quickly. 14:1. Let's see if I can get there quickly. Let's go to the Rashi, and Rashi will take us to the verse. Yeah, so here we go. Let's see. This looks like yeah. So there's the stuma, the end of that paragraph. And then it's, Moses keeps on speaking. You are the children of the Lord your God. You shall not gash yourselves, shave the front of your head because of the dead, right? The Jews not allowed to
Mutilate.
Sorry?
Mutilate.
Mutilate oneself in a state of mourning. For you are a consecrated people to your God, to the Lord your God, and in you, right? Here you go. You are the people that he chose to be his people. Segula, right? To be his treasured people. Mikol amim asher al panei adama. So that's that unique covenantal relationship we have with God. And
There's I'm sorry. There's often sort of a parental fatherly sort of thing, right, between God and the Jewish people. Like he's wrathful and angry and loving, and I mean there are many attributes that one might associate with.
Yeah. With Avinu Malkeinu, he's our Father, our King.
Right.
That's an interesting study in itself to go through all the attributes and names or relationships we relate to as God. So it says Rashi over here, I'll prove to you that the word children can mean students because we are God's, right? We are God's children. And that apparently most simply means, he taught us. We're his students. We've accepted his teaching. V'omer, and there's another proof, says Rashi, from Malachim. B'nei hanavim asher Beit El, the sons of the prophets who were in Bethel, and that was talking about their students. V'chein b'Chizkiyahu, the king, shelimei Torah l'kol Yisrael, he taught Torah to the whole people. V'karam banim, and then he says, "Kindalach, children." The name of B'nei Ata al Tishalu. And Kishem Shatalmidim Kruim Banim, just like the students are called children, Kacharav Kreyav, just so to the rabbis is a type of father figure, right? Shenema, Avi Rechev Yisrael. And that's an accolade given to Elisha, who referred to his teacher Elijah. He says, "Father, Father, the chariot of Israel." Okay, so that's a very interesting commentary, right? Something we don't normally think about when we look at the Shema, right? So teach them to your children means your children, not anyone that will listen, right? Your students. Comments, questions?
Was Aryeh a popular guy in his time? He seems to be ranting and raving a lot.
He held a very high position. He was the chief rabbi of Prague, which in those times was a major center for Jewry. But I have heard that his books were better read after that time. In more recent times, he's been more embraced. And it might be because he came out, against them.
Isn't the law that you should respect your teacher or do something for your teacher before you do it for your parent? Isn't there a passage somewhere that elevates teachers above parents in terms of respect owed?
Yes, there is. Which, by the way, is also an Aristotelian idea, right? Aristotle said, your parents gave you life, your teacher teaches you how to live life, which is, I think, very true from a Torah point of view as well. So I'm not sure where it's derived from, but the Talmud says if two people are drowning, one is your father and one is your Rebbe, you should save your Rebbe. And it's unless your father's also your rabbi. Yeah. And the Talmud says why? Because your father brought you into this world. Your Rebbe is bringing you into the next world. Right? That's a different way of saying how to live, right? It's giving you more life. It's a more significant life. So yeah, it's even given more precedence than the physical.
That feels like a self-serving answer. I'm sorry. Save the rabbi first, said the rabbi. Said the rabbi.
Save me! I mean,
Yeah.
save
Over
the
your own father. Make sure
Yes.
you.
That's why you've taught your kids to swim, Don. You
That's
don't want to take
definitely-
the chance. You don't take the risk. I
That's
know.
right.
I know.
That's why I learned to swim.
Yeah, but I think that is the understanding, by the way, that the influence, that the wisdom, the knowledge that we live with is very significant, right? And we should acknowledge where it came from and the people that gave it to us. Yeah, I don't know if I have any rabbis that I would sooner save than my wonderful father.
So in terms of teaching Torah to your children, is this the only place that this is enjoined upon you? Like, is this where it occurs in the Torah that one is supposed to teach your children? Or is this a repeated motif in the...
Uh-huh. So good question.
I've often heard the expression, you're Jewish if your kids are Jewish. I don't know if you've heard that before. It's kind of neat because it really requires it to go forever.
Right.
But
yeah, okay, I have to think about that. There definitely are many places about, your children. And, again, the Goaria asks over here, he says, when it comes to Pesach, and it says your children will ask you, no one ever said that means the disciples, right? We understand that's real children. So he says a very interesting answer. He says that if you look at the grammar, it's different. It doesn't say lebincha, to your child. It says levanecha, to your children, plural. In Pesach, it says ki yishalcha bincha, when your child, singular. So he says that the singular is more specific than the plural, and therefore by Pesach it's your physical children, but over here it's actually in the word your children plural. That comes to, it's less specific. There are more of them. Who are those? Those are the students. The Rambam, Maimonides, he has an interesting language, and I'm not sure where he derives it from, but he says, okay, we have this midrash over here, and it's accepted, but he says one's own children come before others' children. He definitely reads this also in a simple or obvious reading. Right? Teach them to your children. Those are the most obvious people. Then anyone who wants to learn, you should go out of your way to teach them as well. But your prime occupation, your prime education should be to your own children. So now the question is Bet Tefillah a satisfactory substitute to teaching them to your children yourself?
No, it's not a substitute, but it makes a difference. A recent study of Baltimore Jewry by Brandeis looked at the question of the impact of Jewish day schools on children's marriage patterns and observance, and concluded that going to a Jewish day school made a substantial difference, but it's not a substitute.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if in our time that study is really, you'd have to start with the same parents, right? And say, okay, the Cohens and the Levis are, very similar observance, very similar values. These ones send their kids to, to Park School, and these ones sent their kids to Beth Tefillah. I don't know if nowadays that's I would imagine the parents who are sending their kids to non-Jewish schools are generally not as engaged, observant as the ones sending their kids to the Jewish schools. Generally, I mean, of course, I'm sure there are exceptions. I for sure the ones sending their kids to public school are wealthier. So they didn't have to spend all that money on Jewish schools. But it's an interesting thing to note on that study. If it's really, do they start at the same place?
I'll send you the study.
Yeah, I wish the Jewish community would turn around and say, that's it, no more Jewish schools. We're all going to send our kids to public schools, and we'll make a Hebrew school in the afternoon. What would the public schools do with another, 10,000 kids here in Baltimore? That have to take them, right? That's the law. And you'd have a lot of yarmulkes and tzitzis running around, Pikesville High School, Asma, at least they'd get some good teaching. The secular studies would be, okay. That's my commentary that goes on and on and on. Very good, gentlemen. Okay.
As a graduate of Park School, I have to say.
Did you go to Park? I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah,
I knew it. I knew there was something about you. Now it's all clear.
Fight back. Kick. How was that for you? And are you happy you went there rather than to Jewish school?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was pretty fed up with Jewish day schools by the time I'd finished Schechter. So those 9 years of.
Oh, you only went. We call it finishing school.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't go there from first grade.
No, I went there for high school.
Okay. Yeah, well, fine. But David, were you in Jewish school? Public school?
Yeah, the closest Jewish school to where I grew up was about an hour and 20 minutes away. So I 100% went to public school.
Okay. And when you look back, it is what it is, of course, but would you, well, please God, you'll have kids, how you have kids? I think I asked you this before, right? But you're married, right? Practicing. Okay. So do you think it's an important thing to send kids to Jewish school?
I think it's important for them to have the education. I think my public school was kind of moderately eclectic, I would say. And I think having exposure to kind of all of these different thoughts and ideas and beliefs, and kind of forming a tolerance for them, and understanding. But then also it made me appreciate more of what I was getting on the weekends at the shul.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. The rebellious kids in the Jewish day school rebel against Judaism, because that's what, if you would send a kid like that to public school, they probably would rebel towards Judaism, right? That it's not such a simple thing to
Yeah, I probably would have been that kid because I also rebelled against public school and ended up going to vocational school, which was a phenomenal experience that I would support for anyone. It was what is now led me to being in medicine. So
Amazing. Neat.
Okay, great. Okay, Jason, Uri is suing me already. If you want to just jump on the case.
Class action, yeah.
I wanted to just do one more Rashi. No, it actually was the Ramban. So the Nachmanides, I thought I put it on the sheet. Nachmanides says like this. He says, well, since our relationship with God is multi-generational, right? It's the covenant ladorot. It's the covenant for all generations. And when you look at the two covenantal signs of the Jewish people, the Brit Milah, the circumcision, immediately, a boy is 8 days old, you're already entering him into the covenant. Shabbat is a covenant Ladoratam for their generation. So he says, well, since this is a generational covenant, we got to teach our kids. We have to indoctrinate our kids. We have to enter this is entering our children into the covenant, because if not, how are they going to know, right? We are the teachers, the guardians, to make sure that the next generation is embracing of the covenant. That's really the important thing here. Okay, fine. We're not going to come back to this verse next week, so we did a few words. That's good. The Talmud is very interesting. It says, these words, when you lie down and when you get up, is the Shema at night and the Shema in the morning. You should say this paragraph, right? So you see, the Talmud changes, right? You say these words. What are these words? Yeah, this paragraph, this chapter. When you lie down and when you get up. When you stay at home and when you are away, that the Talmud says something quite interesting. It says, I think I said in the Rashi here. Not really the one I wanted, but fine. When you sit in your house and when you walk on the way, the Torah is thus speaking of the usual way of living. And this therefore means the usual time of lying down and the usual time of rising up. That's, it's not when you subjectively go to sleep and you subjectively wake up. It's when people usually do that. It's the way of life. So it's the first 3 hours of the morning is your time, and at night from the stars out until midnight, if not the whole night. Okay. Comments, questions, lawsuits. It's amazing what's in one verse in the Torah, right? When you stop to analyze it. Yeah, maybe a question for you, just to personalize or whatever. Do you think there is a challenge in discussing the Torah ideas, in general conversation, most of the time? Is it socially acceptable?
No.
Why not? So strange, right? The most uplifting, beautiful discussion. But it's funny, isn't it? People will look at you might look at you as strange.
In secular culture, your religious beliefs are considered off limits as opposed to other beliefs, perhaps. They're deeply personal and you don't go there. That's the assumption made talking about Torah, I guess.
I mean, is there a sense though that it infuses your other thoughts and ideas beyond? That is, in your normal conversations, are you relating to people in a way that is already touched by these things? When you talk with others, are you already, in some sense, if your conversation is about politics or is about something, are you already doing it from a position that's informed by these ideas? And should you be, is it enjoining you in that way to be, like, do you have to be talking about Torah to be talking about Torah? I guess.
That's very interesting. There was, that's interesting. There was a rabbi, I actually knew him, Rabbi Nachman Bullman. He was a genius of a man, and he lived in Israel. And I remember a friend of mine telling me about a conversation he had with him, which was something like introducing this rabbi to a bunch of friends that were not very interested in Judaism at all. And the rabbi wanted to meet them, and they were interested. And he said to the rabbi, "What are you going to speak about? All they want to speak about baseball and politics." And he said, "Of course, that's what I'm going to speak to them about. But whatever I'm going to speak about, it's going to be Torah." So yeah, maybe I think that's a very yeah, that's good. I think easier said than done, right? That that it really does penetrate that far, and you're able to.
I'm often accused at work of being Talmudic. That's
But that doesn't go to talking about Torah. It goes to
no,
style
I know.
of argument.
That's right.
Style of argument.
No, I know. Still,
Basis.
it penetrated.
Yeah, well, I think that it does.
It's a Jewish trait.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Well, what if we look at it this way?
Yeah, and every time they ask you a question, you go, "And what if we look at it that way?" Right? You answer your questions with questions, and
That's right.
Excellent. Okay, friends. Thank you.
Great to see everybody.
I think, by the way, I did send out a separate email about next week also doing Tuesday. If you want to just tell me, you can.
Yeah, I think that's fine for me.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Should be fine for me as well. Hopefully, I will not be distracted. I apologize.
No problem. Okay. Jason,
Get your email ready. Should be good.
Yeah, you did. Fine. Good. And Uri, I don't. You'll have it out with Gil, but you're more than invited to be here, even if he's with us.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Bye for now, friends.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.